Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for coming along today. So today we'll be talking from my experience and from what I see in the market, like the challenges we face when we try to secure mobile apps. And like normally people are talking, oh yeah, secure mobile apps, do that and that. But I believe there's a lot of challenges that people don't usually talk about when trying to secure mobile apps. So a little bit of introduction who I am. I'm a information security consultant / researcher. I work with some financial institutions to secure their mobile apps, and I do a bit of embedded security research. That's me. To start with an introduction, sorry, it's a bit boring, but I'll try to make it a little bit quick. So yeah, mobile. We all know it's a mobile first world. Mobile banking is everywhere. Mobile attacks is on the increase, especially malware and all of that. We all know this. The main problem with mobile apps is not like other stuff, like let's say web applications, where it's hard to get your hands on the web application code itself unless you have access to the server itself or whatever. For mobile apps, your application code is always available online. Or people can grab it from the phone itself. Like APKs are available on websites. For iOS, it's you can grab the IPAs of the apps from the phone. And that makes it a challenge for businesses, and that's why we have tools to obfuscate the code, to protect the codes, to put runtime protections into the apps, in order for people to not be able to reverse engineer your app and actually start attacking it. So the problem with that is that you will start like, let's enable obfuscation, let's enable runtime protection, let's enable hooking detection. But the way how to implement these controls and everything is the challenging part. It's really challenging to know or like implement these controls in the right way. And that's the challenges that we'll be talking about basically today. And to start with, easy one, device, when you are trying to secure and do stuff, device and OS fragmentation is really a problem. For example, especially on Android, you have the various flavors of OSs, various implementations, and you start putting your security controls, you test it on 1-2 devices internally, or let's say 20-30 devices, but then it goes to millions of devices out in the wild. And it makes it really, really hard to prevent false positives and blocking users that shouldn't be blocked. And like, just to give an example, like what goes wrong sometimes. For example, manufacturers, Google has like some standard, let's pick on Google. They have like some standard like implementations, like this is how the device should reply back when you check, for example, for developer options. We have developer options on. That's the official Google standard on how the device should reply back when you want to check if developer options are enabled or not. For example, I think this was one of Samsung implementations where the device replies back with development settings enabled. So, for example, if you have a check, let's say a RASP control or something that checks if developer options are enabled. So it goes and checks for that one, the official Google implementation, because you don't know what Samsung have done in the background or whatever. And then that's it. You check for that, but then the device will reply with that. But then your control will consider that as something. Oh, developer options are actually enabled. They are not enabled. Sorry, should be flipped around. And then at that point, even if the device doesn't have the developer options enabled, it will still be read as, even if the device has the developer options disabled, it will still be read as if it's enabled. And same this is like the official Google standard for the device to reply if ADB enabled, ADB shell and stuff like that, replies back with this. Xiaomi at some point in one of their devices, that's how it replies back with double quotations, and that causes false positives and all of that, because you'll be checking for this, but you'll get this, and you will never get a match. So basically that creates, me personally, I've seen so many stories happening with this kind of implementations and false positives. You start receiving calls from customers. Oh, I cannot log into the app. I cannot log into the app. Many times this has happened. And also to add to that, sometimes it's just out of your controls. At some point, for example, Google shipped unlocked devices with unlocked bootloaders, and that causes issues for you because, for example, if you are checking or blocking users depending on unlocked bootloaders, then users will be reaching out to you like, oh, I cannot log in, but then you will have no idea why they are not able to log in. And then you discover that, oh, he has one of the Google Pixel that got shipped with unlocked bootloaders. So there's various challenges when it comes to this. Moving on to the next challenge, I think that's a problem for many aspects of the cybersecurity fields, but I think it's a bit like, I would say, more extreme when it comes to mobile security, because you have like some attacker or some like ethical hacker or whatever releases a new bypass, let's say for root detection, and then you start like, oh yeah, you go to your security teams, you start ask them to analyze that and research a way to protect against that bypass. Normally that takes the process at least weeks and sometimes up to months. But by that time, you will have much more bypasses that got released. So it's like, normally it's just a cat and mouse game. And just to give an example, Magisk Alpha, which is one of the 100 root tools that are usually used, back in 2024, you look at the frequency of the updates. Not to say in each update there was a new bypass, but usually there is. You have like in less than 25 days, you have at least three releases. So like no security team can keep up with this. It's really hard. Yeah. And it's just really hard. And, the next challenge is basically when you want to use a tool, like, for example, to protect your mobile app or choose a vendor for your mobile app. It's not only just that, oh, I want debugger detection to be there. I want hooking detection to be there. I want something to obfuscate my app. But also, it's not only about the generalized stuff. You want to be specific what your app needs. So you need to really have deep understanding of your app from a security perspective and from a development perspective. What's inside the app, what we really need to protect, and what actual security controls we need to be into the app in order to provide the best security possible. Without having that deep information about your app, you won't end up choosing the right vendor or the right tool for your app. And just to give an example on like what happens here, let's pick on like a mobile app coded in Flutter, right? If Flutter has its own obfuscation, it can obfuscate code for you, right? So you go into the market, you want to choose a tool, or like regardless, open source or vendor or whatever it is. Considering Flutter has its own obfuscation, we have vendor X with average obfuscation, strong grasp protection, runtime protections, and the cost is low. And then you have vendor Y, it can offer you strong obfuscation, strong runtime protection, and cost is high. Let me ask this question. Who would go with vendor X? Okay. Vendor Y? Right. I would say both questions are right, because, again, it depends your app needs. So, for example, you look at it, if Flutter obfuscation is protecting the sensitive parts of the app that I want to protect, then I might consider vendor X. So that's the way I want to look at it. What parts of sensitive parts in my app I want to protect. And depending on that, I choose which tool I want to choose for my app. And another thing is, and that's really needed especially for very, very sensitive apps, and like mainly specifically talking about financial institutions and fintech apps. It's basically to have some level of customization or granularity when you are trying to protect your app. Because having just one on and off, for example, for hooking detection, isn't really helpful for very, very sensitive apps, because you really want to target specific functions. Like, you don't want the same level of protection to be applied, for example, at the login versus some just UI thing or something like that. You don't want that, because you really want, like, anything cryptographic, anything at the login, for example, and all of that. You really want to target it specifically and be like, give me extra protection for that specific function. For example, payment attack. This is just like an example. So these all sorts of things when we look at it and try to choose the right tool for your app. And I think the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges also, is when it comes also to, after we choose our tool and we are using a tool and all of that, and then comes the challenge: what's the level of obfuscation we are putting into our app? What's the level of runtime protection we are putting in our app? Because in the end, you cannot be like, oh, I'll obfuscate everything and I'll put runtime protection in every part of the app. That's possible, and that's, yes, definitely gives you really good level of security. But then you will start struggling with performance of the app. You'll start struggling with app crashes in the wild and all of that. And at that point, you really want to have some balance where, for example, you really want to understand your app, again, understanding the code of the app. Because the problem with, I mean, many times I've seen it, is like, security people, they don't really understand the code of the app. They just know, oh, let's enable hooking detection. But in my point of view, the security person really need to have an understanding of the app code level in a similar way as the developer. He needs to know what SDKs are on the app, sensitive functions when they are called, and everything basically. So, yeah, and basically, yeah, by having that level of understanding, you can decide, oh, what I want to give max protection or selective protection or no protection. For example, UI stuff. Normally, you don't really need to protect that. And also, another challenge is basically with obfuscation, you really cannot afford to make mistakes. Mainly because once your app is out in the wild, it's really, really hard to protect the mistake that you have done. For example, you have a function, let's go to this. You have a sensitive function that went in the wild, access token or whatever it is, and then you have this function not obfuscated. And then, oh, you noticed that, and then in the next release you were like, oh yeah, let me obfuscate this. And you protected that. That's so good. But there's various tools at the hacker's disposal that they can actually keep pattern matching your unobfuscated function to later and later versions of your app. And basically, your obfuscation here in the newer versions of the app, it is good, 100%, and it's the right thing to do, but it's actually kind of easy to break. And hackers can keep pattern matching your code until later versions. And that's why I said you really cannot afford to make mistakes here. And another one is, and that's really annoying, and that's mainly specific to Apple, is basically it forces you to retain debug simples in the app for various reasons, for app functionality, or for your app to be accepted in App Store. For example, in this example here, we have an encryption function. Encryption functions, if you strip the simples and you submit your app to the App Store, you will get rejected, because Apple static analysis tools that they check your app with when you submit, they really need to use the simples to do the test and make sure that your app is compliant and all of that. So basically, you end up keeping the simple of this encryption function, and then that exposes your function basically. And even if you have it obfuscated, that's it. Attackers can actually reverse engineer your app and basically understand that, oh yeah, this is an encryption function. And there is some ways, like sometimes, to protect these depending on the tooling that you're using and all of that. But that's actually a proper issue. And also, like, for example, Apple doesn't like also they have a problem when you use keychain or like their biometric stuff. Also it leaves traces and symbols that you actually cannot hide. But when they are doing it in their own iOS operating system, they have their own ways to hide it. But when you are doing it in your app, it's really hard to hide, which is unfair, but that's how they want it to be. And moving on to the next one, so many times we put security controls into the app. We protect it and all of that. But then most of the times when the app is in the wild, we don't really know or understand what's happening. Like, if the app has crashed, or if users have been facing false positives, and like a user calls you like, oh yeah, I'm not able to log in, or my app is crashing and all of that. If you have no means of monitoring or sending logs back to your backend, you will never be able, or it will be really, really hard to fix those issues. Because, like you need to have some kind of monitoring that tells you, oh, this is how many times this security control have been triggered. This is how many times your device has crashed, your app has crashed in the wild. So, to have this, there's various ways to actually send logs to the backend, but Application X is basically, your app is crashing whenever it detects, let's say, hooking detection, and that's it. You don't know anything. You don't know what happened. The other choice is to actually send logs before, just before you crash. But also this comes with risks, because attackers you can give the attackers a little bit more time before you crash to read memory or hook into something or whatever. So, or like another way to protect against this, for example, save the logs in some secure way, crash the app, and then in the next launch try to send, for example, the logs to your backend. That way sometimes, reduces the risks, but and that's basically the challenge here. You're either between a choice that you'll be blind, or you really face some risks because you want to send logs. And also another challenge is basically the mobile malware. Mobile malware is becoming a really, really a problem lately, especially on Android, and also on iOS. It's becoming a bigger problem lately. But the problem with malware is that you think that, I have RAS protections, I'll put everything into the app and all of that. But that doesn't equal you have a good malware protection. Because, yes, having good RAS security controls is really good and does protect you against some of the malware types. But from my experience, especially in the past few years, and especially that malware targeting like financial stuff and fraud and all of that, doesn't actually trigger any of the typical security controls like, hooking detection, debug detection, none of that. Because it uses various ways, like via screen overlays, to show you a screen that tells you, can you enter the password? So you enter the password, but it's not actually the password screen that you have. Or screen sharing, or custom keyboards, or leaked certificates, and we will come to that in a minute. And with this example, for example, at some point Google had this problem where attackers were signing the malware with Android platform certificates. And that's basically makes it a legitimate app. It's really hard to catch because it's signed with a legitimate certificate. And also there are other cases in the wild where you have like normal apps that are known to everybody, and sometimes their certain signing cert of the APK gets leaked. And then hackers start signing their malware using that certificate, and it becomes much harder to detect those malwares, especially if you are detecting malware depending on the signing cert. Like, there's various ways to detect malware. You can look at the signing cert, you can look at the package name, you can look at the hashes, the behavioral stuff as well. So and also with the malware, and again, especially on Android, it's basically really hard sometimes. And at least over the past year, most of the malwares that I've looked at, once it's installed into the phone, you really cannot remove it from the app from the device without actually having some kind of ADB shell into the device, remove the specific package of the malware. It basically refuses whenever you do the long hold in the device and try to delete it. It will actually prevent you from doing that. So and that becomes really hard for normal people if they are like infected with a malware, and then they call you and you tell them, you have a malware on your device, and that's how you can delete it. Open a Linux terminal and all of that, which is nobody can, like, it's really hard unless you are like in the computer science field or stuff like that. And then you just leave them with wiping out their phone or accept the risks. So, and that's a really big challenge in the malware field that's many organizations are struggling with. Some organizations go with relaxing the controls and actually allow more malware to have better user experience. But also other organizations go with, no, we don't want to allow anything. We will overflow our customer service. That's fine, but we need more protection. And that's, yeah, and that's the challenges with malware. The last challenge that we will talk about today is basically low-level and OS vulnerabilities. And I think it's self-explanatory here. It's basically, you have the operating system, if it has a kernel exploit or anything like that, your app, whatever protection you put into your app, in the end, it's running most of the time at the app level, at the user level. It doesn't have like deep down like permissions to actually go to the kernel level and all of that. And then, but attackers sometimes or many times have kernel level access because of vulnerabilities and all of that. And those are like, you can sometimes detect and prevent some of them, but they are really, really challenging to detect or prevent. What makes this even worse, especially on Android, this is the spread of the Android versions across all their Android versions. Normally we have this issue with Android, like many devices, they are still on the previous or old Android versions. And that's really a problem because it leaves you with a choice of, let me look at how many users are on the very old Android versions. And then it turns out that, 5%, 10% of user base is actually on very old Android versions because of this spread here. And then you'll be like, then we cannot really actually block 10%, 5% of our user base. So you end up being like just doing your best to do the security, and that's it. And also there are like various challenges here. Like I just put like the stuff that I thought that mostly faced on daily basis. But like there's other stuff like JNI misuse, insecure third-party SDKs that are integrated into the app, and all of that. So there is not really like, let's say like a proper solution for all of these challenges. It's always like mostly try to balance things between user experience, between security, between whatever you can do. So I would emphasize on the first point like a lot. And again, we mentioned this briefly, but having your security team really understanding the app will help them secure the app in a better way. And also having your development team understanding how they can develop secure code. Because, for example, sometimes your vendor or your tool that's protecting your app is actually has a weak point, and that's a standard in the toolings. Like you cannot have a tool that protects everything. It's basically, will have like some kind of a weakness. So this weakness will always need to be shared, and devs need to be trained on that. You shouldn't be using that thing in order for us to not have unobfuscated code, for example. And also another solution is if you use like for sensitive journeys, for sensitive stuff, it's basically multi-layered runtime protections, double layer of the same guard or various guards or security controls, or actually use multiple vendors or multiple tools into your app. And also, as we mentioned, this there's no security solution or a tooling that tells you one size fits all. Forget about the marketing that tells you, oh, our tool is the best and all of that. I've got my hands on many tools in the market, and once you go deep down asking them questions, they will actually end up being all the same. And yeah, again, back to the logging and stuff. Me personally, and from my experience, I would advise into logging and all of that, but maybe to balance it out sometimes, like, oh no, we cannot log that security control that's at the log and it's really dangerous. Or for example, oh, let's log other stuff. So you can actually maybe balance it out between logging some stuff and crashing into some stuff. But also, like, some organizations decide to go, no, we'll take the risk. We'll try to secure the logs as much as possible. We'll prevent attackers from hooking into the function that's logging or whatever it is. And we need to log everything. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.